Welcome to Bold Blind Beauty and Beyond Sight, an online community and magazine. I am your host, Nasreen, and today we're going to be featuring our cane-enabled segment. So in addition to celebrating all things related to the white cane, including safety and usage, personalization, this monthly series also shares broad perspectives in the field and parents of blind and visually impaired children, advocates, and exciting news. On the technology front, Cane Enabled is published on the fourth Monday of each month. Today, we have a special guest with us who is thriving and striving. We are going to be speaking with Mr. Ed Henkler, who is a social entrepreneur and advocate, and who is very passionate about improving quality and life and employability of people who are blind or visually impaired, making the world more accessible who are visually impaired. And his website is theblindguide.com. So if you want to learn more about Ed and what he does, you can visit theblindguide.com. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Nasreen.
Thanks for being our featured guest today on Cane Enabled. You're a social entrepreneur and advocate, and we want to learn more about why you are so passionate about assisting folks with disabilities to thrive. For someone who's not part of the community, why do you have such passion?
Starts with a bit of naivete. Many years ago, in the early 1990s, my mom called and told me that she had macular degeneration. At the time, I had no idea what that meant. I told her that I knew degeneration was a bad thing, and I couldn't have asked it that way, but at the time, I didn't know what a macula was. So she explained what was going on, and it was at that point only affecting one eye. And at the time, there were no treatments for it, unlike we have some options today. So she was still able to maneuver in society. She still had one solid eye. But I told my wife we're going to have to do something when her other eye goes, and we may have to react quickly. We were living in the suburbs of Philadelphia. My mom was living down in Florida. And it was 5 years later when she called and told us that the other eye was starting to go, and we had her moved within a week. Well, it was a very disconcerting time. We, obviously for her, but also for us, we knew nothing about blindness. I can't say I even would know that I had run across somebody with a cane or that somebody was blind. I believe we'll come back to it later, but I do have some personal experiences, but I am sighted and at this point, 20/20 vision. So we moved my mom up, had no idea what to do, and there was really no accessible internet at that point, so you couldn't just go on and look for associations for the blind. But we stumbled across a group that was in our hometown, and in the space of 1 to 2 years, they restored her independence. I saw her travel further than she did before losing her sight. She traveled outside the country for the first time. She became a spokesperson for the Association for the Blind, something she would never done before. And I think all in all, not only thrived, but probably lived her life better than she did before vision loss.
What were some of the challenges for you, Ed, as your mother was losing her sight? How did you cope with those challenges?
I don't think I realized at the time what it was like to be a caregiver. So initially, we just jumped in and tried to do everything we could to help her. I think we did a lot of the wrong things, from just not knowing how to guide somebody who's blind, letting them grab your elbow, that type of thing, keeping them in control, to not understanding what she couldn't see. One of the stories that I've told a lot of people is as her disease progressed, she couldn't tell who I was unless she happened to know what clothing I had on. Obviously, no central vision. But I'd see her say, "Oh, look, there's a dime on the floor." And that used to be maddening to me. How can you see that tiny little shiny dime and not see your son, who's almost 6 feet tall? Had to go through that, had to understand how to help her in a way that let her remain independent. That was certainly our goal, and it was her goal. Had to learn a whole new language, had to learn how to describe directions to her. And I think the other piece is there was some sense of frustration. My dad had died early, and now my mom couldn't see. And I came from a family where my grandparents all lived in their late 80s or 90s. Suddenly, very early in my life, I was caring for a mom that couldn't take care of all of the things in her life and didn't even have a father around. So frustration, concern, fear, not knowing how to deal with her, having no idea what was possible for her after her sight was gone. the list is long.
Do you think you're better because of it today? Is that the passion that drives you?
I think I'm dramatically better. I look back and I think, and before I go on, I want to say clearly what my mom was going through was worse than what we were going through. I wouldn't pretend as the caregiver that my life was the same as hers, who now can't see or couldn't see. But I had been somewhat blessed in my life. I spent 10 years in the Navy. I spent 21 years at Merck. I'd always been employed, really hadn't had any significant challenges. And I think I was a bit smug, not probably in a bad way, probably not even atypical for many other people, but it's easy to say I understand other people have challenges, but when you haven't confronted them and maybe they haven't struck close to home, I don't think you understand as well. I have learned since, number one, how hard some people are trying with very little success, how challenging it is to learn to navigate a world when you can't see, and a lot of things like that. So it's made me sensitive to people with disabilities in general. And then that has carried over to other people that are challenged, whether it be transportation challenged, employment challenged, whatever it may be. And I was not that way before. I think I might have said I was, but I wasn't.
You are also a coach and mentor and an advocate. Can you highlight some of these areas for us?
I'm going to start before we talk about the community of people who are blind, and that is when I was back in working for the pharmaceutical company. This was probably in the early 2000s. I had a woman who was working for me, and she told me about this new group being formed called the Women's Mentoring Network. And she said, you should attend, because I think I've mentored throughout my life. I was a Navy ROTC instructor in my mid-20s. And at that point, I was trying to help younger people than me, although I was pretty young at the time. I was trying to help them navigate college, navigate deaths of parents, break up with girlfriend or boyfriend, and all that type of thing. So I mentored early on. And then she wanted me to join this women's mentoring network. And I said, well, think about the name. I'm not a woman. I wouldn't belong there. And she said, oh, there are lots of men that show up. Well, that seems fair enough. I'll go. So I showed up at the meeting, and there is one other male there and about 30 women. And I said, I don't see all the men. And she said, well, I might have lied. And I said, okay. But I became very involved with it. And I think maybe that was the first step I took towards understanding others. It's not fair to call women a minority since they're a majority, but they're often treated as a minority. And I started recognizing the challenges they had, particularly for younger women who had families, trying to raise a child, trying to work, trying to do everything. So I think that's when I first really understood that mentoring role and became formally involved in it. Since then, what motivates me with people who are blind, as many people know, there's a statistic that's thrown out that there's 70% unemployment for people who are blind. And there's a lot of noise around that statistic. There are some that say it's lower, but the point is it's a very high number. And I think if you look back far enough, maybe it's 20, 30, 40 years, maybe there was more reason for it. Probably still not, but at least more understandable. With today's technology, it's completely inexcusable. In fact, I'd say there's probably no reason for the unemployment to be any different amongst people who are blind versus someone who's sighted, and certainly not a factor of 10. So that's what's gotten me involved in using the same techniques I was using with somebody that was sighted to help them realize their potential, to help them learn to navigate corporate uncertainties, and maybe my primary theme, which is to understand what drives you, what's your passion. And if I can go into a little bit of a story there, when I used to be asked what my passion was, I would have told you that I was passionate about strategic planning and trying to help senior decision makers figure out what they want to do. And as I look back, that was a skill. It wasn't a passion. I wouldn't have invested any money in that. I didn't really care about it. It's just something I did well, and it's what a company paid me for. It took unemployment, or technically early retirement, for me to finally realize that what I was passionate about was helping people who are blind thrive. And I will say it wasn't me who figured that out. It was others who kept observing that everything about me changed when I talked about people who were blind. And I finally told my wife, I think the universe is yelling at me and I just need to adjust my approach. And that's when I really switched hard over into this concept of prevention of blindness and enabling technology to help people who are blind thrive. But it's really the same things. It's uncovering what you believe in, what you're passionate about, and then finding out how to present yourself and sell yourself in a way that makes you a success. Final piece, perhaps, of this answer is I've been mentoring a young man for, at this point, probably 4 years. When I connected with him, he was the son of people I had worked with at the pharmaceutical company. When I connected with him, he was one course away from graduating from Princeton. So this is a man who is completely blind, had a full scholarship to Princeton, made it within one course of graduating, and had been in that state for 2 years. 2 years without graduating, with only one course to complete, and sitting at home with his parents unemployed. And it was his parents who begged me to mentor him. Through the fortune of a strong network, was able to connect with the dean of his school, who said, "We love this young man. We want him to come back." So I got on the phone with him. This was within a day of us agreeing to work together. And I said, "You need to get on the phone immediately. The college wants you back. They want you to graduate." And within 6 months, he was graduated from Princeton. So wonderful accomplishment there. I helped him find an internship in an accounting firm, which is where his skills were. And since that time, he has been early promoted twice. He is now about a third of the way through a master's degree in taxation. And while he still lives at home, his life is completely flipped. He's a very happy, confident person who is moving gradually ahead of his peers, sighted or otherwise.
Sometimes it just takes one person to make a huge difference in someone's life. And I think that's exactly what you've done.
Nothing could make me feel better. He's not my son, but there's some element of parental pride in what he's accomplished.
Absolutely.
His parents are friends and are so appreciative also.
You were also part of the Igniting Power Initiative. You were also part of that. And also on your website, I noticed there was an article about augmented reality. How do you think augmented reality can help folks with visual impairments?
As with any technology, it opens up a lot of possibilities that might not be accessible to them just through what remains of their senses. So it's been used in a number of different ways. The first time I really even became aware of the term, was a startup out of the University of Pennsylvania that was developing beaconless indoor navigation. And it was using cues in the environment to help somebody who is blind understand where they were within that environment, signage, logos, things like that. And that would create a picture that could either be presented visually to somebody with low vision or audibly to somebody that had no vision or at least less than that. So for anybody that doesn't understand, augmented reality really just takes reality, the world that anyone who is sighted sees, but then it overlays content on top of that. The simplest form of that might be some text or an arrow pointing, here's the exit, whatever it may be, but it can go into incredible depth. It could be information on a product that's being used, that type of thing. So it augments what anyone can see, regardless of their level of vision. Where that has gone since then is dramatically further. So there's a smart cane. There are many smart canes right now, but all of those take signals from the environment and augment them with additional information to help somebody, in this case, who's blind, navigate the world. One of my favorite ones is called Foresight Augmented Reality, and this is pretty new. It's down in Atlanta, and it's a couple of other places. But what they have done, actually, the backstory is funny. A sighted person was on a cruise with his friend who is blind. And he said in the course of a week, he got so tired of taking his friend to the bathroom, he just said, "There's got to be something different that we can do. This is ridiculous." So what he did is they went home and using beacons, and that's not ideal, but it is the current state of the art. Using beacons, he can get a person to a very specific location and then give them information about that location. So one example, and a lot of this is available on their website, is he shows the person in downtown Atlanta near Georgia Tech going to a bus stop. And as he approaches the bus stop, the app tells him you are at the bus stop, or tells him as he approaches and then says you're here. And then it says the next bus coming through is whatever it is, the B1. That's not the one you want. The one after that will take you to wherever he's trying to go. And then it announces when the bus gets there. And then it proceeds to tell him during his journeys where he is on the journey, what's around him. So that's a much more advanced form of augmented reality where without all of that, At best, he might have a sense of where he is. It would be imprecise, but at least he'd know where he was. He would probably, via GPS, be able to tell where he was within the city. And there are other apps that'll tell what is around him. But this is completely tailored and personalized based on beacons. So if he walks into a restaurant, he can get the menu read to him. It makes him, with maybe a slight delay, every bit as capable as someone is sighted. And it's without the assistance of anyone else. It's just this app providing the same information that a sighted person garners through their vision.
Now, wouldn't that be a perfect world where the blind were able to navigate without assistance at all from anybody?
That's something, Nasreen, that I didn't understand before. We go back to the learnings. To me, if you had gone back to when my mom was losing her sight, and probably for many years afterwards, I would have said, well, she can just grab somebody's arm and she can get there. And I think that goes back to a general accessibility issue that I know I didn't understand. And therefore, we're going to say that many people without disabilities don't understand either. And that is, if I get a new job or if I go to a new place, I don't need to ask for accommodations. I just go there and I'm able to access it. For somebody with disabilities, including blindness, to have to ask does something to you. It makes you feel less empowered. It isn't that the person can't react quickly. They can't put a ramp in if you're in a wheelchair. They can't add JAWS to your software if you need to access it. It's the fact you have to ask. And that makes you, at some level, a second-class citizen, even if the person putting you in that position doesn't recognize it. They probably don't. They aren't viewing you as second class. They're just viewing you as somebody that needs something. They're going to get it for you. Try to put yourself in the position of the person who's blind. How frustrating to always have to ask for accommodations, and how can that not make you feel lesser?
I was reading, through your website, I was looking at some of the blog posts that you had up there, and I was really, intrigued by some of the information. One line in one of the blog posts kind of struck out at me. It was about achieving your dream job. So I have to ask, have you achieved your dream job?
I'd say I'm close. I wouldn't say I'm there. And the reason I put it that way is I love what I'm doing. For 30 years of my life, I worked for companies where I was proud to say that I was a member of the company and I thought we were doing important work, but I was a tiny cog in a large machine. And it also wasn't my passion. They were just doing important work. Right now, I am doing my passion. I'm directly responsible for helping people, such as the young man that I talked about. I'm directly responsible for helping young startups try to bring technology to market that might otherwise not get there. It'll seem selfish, but I have yet to match that passion with similar income. So I'm fortunate that my wife is doing a good job with it, and I certainly supported us for a long time. But it's a missing element, and no matter how much I enjoy what I do, I need to pay bills. So this is the path I'm on. For a long time, I hoped that I could get my money from the startups I supported and from coaching. And it's just become obvious to me that's probably never going to be my primary source of income. And I'm now trying to approach this more from a corporate level, because there are companies that would very much like what I can bring them and the connections I can make within the community of people who are blind, that sort of thing. And I don't want to join the companies. I want to support them and help them be better and let them compensate me. So money isn't everything, and certainly doesn't buy happiness. Those are all true phrases, but it pays bills. And that's the one gap right now. But I love what I'm doing, and it's allowed me to live in a location that I love.
The fact is that you've got a drive, you've got a passion, you're still striving and thriving through it to help, to push along. And you were mentioning about corporate. With the ideas and the social entrepreneurship and the advocacy that you do, I can definitely see over time, especially the upcoming few years, now that thanks to COVID-19, things are sort of going in a different direction. A lot more remote work, a lot more, virtual things are happening virtually. So there may be some, great opportunity out there for you to kind of really connect with all the verticals that you just described that you want to tie together. We wish you all the best of luck in that. And I'm sure there'll be some great ideas and innovations coming out. And I thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure, Nasreen.
To find Ed's feature and many other great articles and innovative information, visit the Cane Enabled page in the Beyond Sight online community at boldblindbeauty.com. Thanks for listening.